Okay.
All right, guys. So let me introduce our speaker this week. So everybody knows John Spiker as the electric guy. We wanted to welcome you to episode 20 of the year. Anyway, tonight's episode is designing and building prop mounts for the fun scenarios. And everybody should know John Spiker, mainly for power, but he's going to show us how he mounts his props, which is pretty interesting because I've seen his roof layout and I'd be scared to death. So anyway, John, it is all yours, sir.
Great. So a couple weeks ago, just the backstory, Ed asked me if I would do a presentation, and I'm like, sure. As mentioned, normally when I do a presentation, it's really about power injection, managing power of your display. But I thought I would do something different this time. So I initially let Ed know I was going to do designing and building prop mounts for precarious scenarios. And upon further thought, I'm like, let's just call it fun scenarios, because anytime we're working on our displays, it's fun. So hence the name change. So real quick, as a disclaimer, this is not intended to be a comprehensive view of everything possible. There are thousands of ways to mount props in fun locations. In my personal scenario, it's my roof. But for all of our houses, it's, we all have different challenges. We all have different scenarios. And there's all kinds of different ideas that can be used to implement how you want your props mounted. In addition to that, the views being expressed are the experiences I personally have had over the last 5 years of doing a pixel display on my roof. So, obviously I got the introductions. For those of you who don't know me, I am my entire display is on my roof. The challenge I have is, if I show you the street view, is that when my audience comes to my house and looks at my display, their viewing distance is nothing but my roof. If I do anything on the ground, they can't actually see it. So it doesn't really add to the allure of the display. It doesn't add any excitement to them. It's just stuff that may be blinking below them. So everything I have to do for eye level is really my roof line and above. So to accomplish that, as you can see, I've taken the perspective of using my roof as a platform and going up. That in itself has its own challenges. I have some personal things that I require. Is one, nothing can be permanently mounted. So everything that goes on my roof has to be modular enough that I can take it up during the year and take it all back down and turn my house into a normal house. There's also a rule set by my lovely wife that I cannot drill into my roof. I can't put anchors on my roof. I can't put attachments on my roof. I can't do anything to the roof at a permanent aspect. As part of that, it just adds that other dynamic that makes me have to think differently for each and every type of scenario that I'm involved with. And my goal for this particular presentation is really to kind of walk you through my thought process on how I've actually done each and every individual element, because there is a different thought process based upon the prop, based upon the resistance, based upon other areas. I'm also wanted to point out that there's two trains of thoughts. You have, like, my mega tree as an example, is mounted to the point where it's designed really to never move, just like most of our mega trees. And I also have other special considerations, especially when it comes to my roof. Obviously, the underlying structure. Is it capable of holding the weight? Is it capable of being able to flex and move and support what's going on without destroying my roof or potentially injuring my family? With my mega tree, if you'll notice in the picture on the left-hand side, the power coming to my house is only about 5.5 feet from it. So if that thing came down, it's literally taking out all the power to my house. So it's a totally different scenario where my mega tree is designed to never, ever move. So those are kind of some of the challenges. I will just quickly, for those of you who don't know me, if you've ever used the power calculator, that's me. So shameless plug for my power calculator. I hope it helps some of you. But there's my quick shameless plug. So safety, I can't talk about this topic without talking about safety. In general, always stay aware. And really what I mean by that is while we're setting up our displays, we get very micro focused. I need to get this prop up. I need to get that prop up. Why is that flickering? Why is that not working? Why is that light turning on and not that light turning on? As we go through those challenges, we really need to stay aware, especially in scenarios like myself, where I'm doing my display on the roof, which kind of leads into the next aspect, ladders. Always remember to keep 2 points of contact. And you know what? Just for fun, don't be me. This was honestly last year. I wasn't going to show it, but I figured why not be real? And it was about a 5-foot fall I took. So safety is important. The drill was in my hand. I could have been seriously hurt. And it's just because I wasn't being aware. It was just one of those situations. And if you're going to be on a roof or any area where you have an opportunity to fall, wear a harness when possible. I honestly wear a harness when I'm on the backside of my roof. I don't on the front side of my roof. I probably should, but I don't. So what I wanted to show here was kind of a day view of the overall infrastructure of my display. As you can see, you saw from the previous picture where it was all lit up and looked pretty. During the day, you can actually see the different components from the mini trees, the spinners, to the towers themselves, and then the snowflakes. And I'm going to walk through each and every one of these components because there's a different methodology I used for the actual mounting of them and how I actually erected this entire structure that I can put up and take down with, again, not independently drilling any holes in my roof. There's no guide wires. There's no nothing. It's just all self freestanding. So for the individual components, and I'm going to go through these in detail, so I'm just going to be probably somewhat quick here, is on the spinner side, I took a methodology of kind of a balance of them, and you'll see this here, and I'll show you in more detail in the next few slides, of it being in the middle. Whereas the towers are kind of set forward and they don't really have anything in front of them as far as a support's concerned. It's all really behind it and then in the middle of it. The snowflakes, I kept it simple, stupid, PVC. I'll also comment as I go through the rest of the slides that all of this structure is 3/4-inch EMT. So anytime except for the snowflakes you see any structure, it is 3/4-inch EMT. The spinners. So this one was kind of fun. I actually had never intended to put spinners on my roof. I started out with this idea of putting up basically pixel poles to a point, and so I ended up designing this small platform. And essentially, as I mentioned before, it's EMT that I bent the bottom at 90 degrees on either side, and then I took into consideration the pitch of my roof, and then brought it up and connected it on the top. It was designed to be obviously the pixel towers. Then I had the idea of singing faces. I didn't like those. So then I replaced that. And this is all within 1 year. Then I put up the mega spinner. And in order to keep it sound, I actually decided to, rather than use regular sandbags, I found it really helpful to use Kevlar sandbags. These allow for you to fill them up with gravel or sand or whatever you want. They still really, really nice, and they're waterproof. At the bottom here are essentially, and I'll show it I got better pictures of it, but EMT hangers that I screw together. And I built this to be as rigid as possible. My concept and idea was that why don't we keep this centered so I've got an equal back balance and a equal front balance, so that as it moves, it's equal on either side. I got equal weight distribution, and then to attach this to the EMT, it's essentially zip ties. And I need to take a breath. Okay. So when it came to the towers, it's a little bit different. Because of the fact that I actually wanted it on my ridgeline, I didn't have the luxury to balance the weight. So I have it very front heavy here where the towers actually stand. And connected to it, you'll notice the snowflakes are not connected directly to the EMT. They're connected to paracord, and I connected them to paracord with zip ties, trying to think that, you know what, let's go ahead and give them the best possible way to flex and move with the wind. So as I had the wind forces from the front, the weight would hopefully potentially not have it move backwards. If I had it from the back, the sandbags that you can see here would keep it from tipping over to the front. And by having the flex of the paracord, it allowed them to shift and move with the wind. So it wasn't a rigid structure. On the other hand, though, the spinners, because of the fact that they didn't have that same luxury, were directly connected to the EMT and zip tied as tight as possible so that they would actually never move. As far as a back support, which is what I'm showing here, it came up the middle, and you can see that bar here, and that's what supported it. And that's actually what I used to be able to determine the pitch to get all of them straight. So I took a full 10-foot piece of EMT, I bent the bottom, and I left about 18 inches back here, and then gave it the 90-degree bend, and I took the full 10 piece, and I brought it up and zip tied it to where I thought it looked like it was correct. And then from there, I marked it, and then drilled a hole through this piece of EMT, through that piece of EMT, and then took and drove through a 1/4-inch bolt to make sure it never moved. The same is true here. So that's what I have here to connect the cross braces at the top and in the middle. The center one, though, was a little different. My initial intention was to put a P10 matrix up here. I actually did put the P10 matrix up there, and it was the scariest thing I'd ever dealt with, so I took it down. It was way top heavy, and it just scared the crap out of me. So I took it down, and I put another snowflake up there. And you can see the hangers in a little more detail here. The one thing I noticed about the hangers when I was doing this is the screws themselves didn't really grab onto it very well. So I ended up adding nuts on the backside and then tying it down as tight as possible with the concept that I didn't want it to move. I wanted this to be structurally sound. If I added enough weight with the sandbags, it should be structurally sound enough to move. One of the other things that I'll note while I'm here is that you'll notice that this is right on my ridge line. One of the weakest points of your roof is the ridge line itself. That's where it connects underneath. So in order to be sure that I was safe doing this, I actually did hire a roofing company to come out and inspect my roof from the top and the bottom before I had clearance to do it. And I just quickly mention that as if anybody's thinking about it, to get that inspection done, give yourself some peace of mind before you decide to start erecting something high and tall and big and heavy on your roof that's going to have a lot of forces against it. The mini trees. So I can talk through it, and I will a little bit, but I did do a short video on these just because I had a lot of questions when I initially did it. So I figured I would share that video here. So I've had a number of people ask me how I mount my mini trees on my roof. So since I was up here doing repairs anyway, I figured I'd do a quick video. So essentially, I have a 3/4 inch piece of EMT that I bent at 90 degrees and then secured it at the bottom. Basically a 2x4 wood base with Kevlar sandbags to hold it down. The bottom ring is actually from a wood stand that I found on Amazon that we cut apart. We welded in the center brace, the back brace, and then a piece of stainless steel that slide over the tube, and then it bolts at the bottom. At the top, is nothing more than a topper that I 3D designed and printed, and then mounted it using hose clamps, and then the star up there. And then to keep it all braced, just using pull straps up to the middle here on either side. Just think of them as guy wires. And it holds it nice and taut and straight. Yes, and then I use bungees at the bottom down here just to keep everything nice and taut. Yep. So it's kind of a quick overview. One of the fun things about building these little mini trees on my roof is that they looked amazing. They also worked really well. I'm going to quickly mention this, but I'm going to probably get this into more detail later. By using the pull straps, it allowed for it to move quite a bit. I will say through the year, I did have to go up on my roof and readjust them a number of times, but I'll get more into detail with that. But this is also the same concept, even if you're mounting them on the ground, that can have like a little mini tree that you're mounting within your yard that you don't want to move, you don't want it to fall over. It worked really well. I'm just going to quickly mention that. The snowflakes, these were a lot of fun. So if anybody's seen my display over the years, I started out with 9 snowflakes on my roof, and I always laid them flat. And I did that all the way up until last year. And when I realized that when I was standing other things up, the snowflakes really just didn't pop. So I went ahead and I started working on a design for using PVC snow stands, and many other people have done it. And I will say it was one of the greatest ideas that has been shared in the community, and that I kind of expanded on for myself. Here was some of my original prototype designs based upon my roof and my needs, and then the final design. One of the things that I liked is I added this center cross brace. And then the back brace is each and every one of the stands, the back brace is a little bit different in length. And I adjust the length of it based upon the pitch and the viewing angle from the street. The other thing that was really nice about these is they would break by themselves. And we were like, well, why do you want it to break? Well, if there was a lot of wind, they would break by themselves. I'd come home from work, and it's kind of my own family internal joke. It'd be like dead man down. Then I had to get up on the roof. I'd just plug it back in, and we'd call it a day. No harm, no foul. I will mention I did use 1-gallon bags and filled them with pea gravel as sandbags. I will never do that again. Although it worked, it lasted through the season. It was a mess. The Kevlar bags that you saw on the spinner, I'm going to be replacing all of those with those because those worked great. And they didn't have the same issues I had with the Ziploc bags. Unfortunately, Ziploc bags, some of them would tear a little, and then I had all kinds of rocks on my roof. It wasn't the best idea in the world. But I liked them a lot. And if anybody's looking to like simply stand up snowflakes, this is a really simple, easy idea. So cool. I kind of went through my display. I went through, showed you how I mounted everything. The towers have been on my roof for, this will be the 3rd season. And I really liked them. As you saw in the earlier pictures, that it kind of gives a great dynamic view. And I loved them until this. So at the end of last season, we had a windstorm come through that we had over 100-mile-an-hour winds. I never thought we would hit 100-mile-an-hour winds, and it absolutely destroyed my display. The snowflakes stood tall, the mini trees stood tall, but my spinners and most of the towers just came tumbling down. It ripped up all of the wires. It destroyed pretty much my entire display. And I'll admit, be honest with you, I was pretty distraught about it. I thought about shutting my entire display down, being done with it. I'm not taking this risk again for my family. It wasn't worth it. And then I honestly spent probably 4 to 5 months thinking about it before I kind of pulled up my big boy pants and went, you know what? I don't do a display for me and my family. I do the display for everybody else. So thinking about that and going through this particular scenario, there's some reflection that I did. I thought about really what worked well and what went really bad. So the ministries and the pull straps really allowed for them to self-fail. And that was a good thought process when I reflected on it. And I'm like, well, that design, it was solid, but it wasn't solid. It allowed for some fudge areas. It allowed it allowed for some fluctuation within the prop. It allowed for it to kind of move with nature when we had those 100-mile-an-hour winds. And I took that and I put it in the back of my mind. I really started thinking about the spinners and the way I designed it. Essentially, those are huge wind sails. And actually, I'm going to go up to the spinners again, because when I mentioned that, I also decided, you know what I, in that aspect is, yeah, I'm adding the mesmerizer spinners. I'm adding the spinny Archies. So, let's go ahead and, take that perspective that I do my display for the audience. I don't do it for me and my family, but let me do it right. So now that I know their wind sails, now that I know I had an epic failure, and luckily I didn't have any, electrical repercussions from what transpired, I have to take a second look at it. So with the towers, again, I knew they were too rigid. It was, I needed to look at it as the limitations I have within my display. I can't put guy wires up. If I had guy wires up, nothing ever would have moved. I mean, that would have been absolutely perfect. But unfortunately, I just don't have a way to attach them. I don't have anything to attach them to. So it's really taking a separate, different perspective and look at, how do I accomplish the goal of giving a great experience and putting things up on my roof, but allowed to do it in a safe manner? Now, I'll be honest, I haven't figured out everything, but I do have some ideas. And last but not least were the snowflakes. As I mentioned when I was kind of talking through them, is that they would self-fail. I mean, dead man down, that's fine. I grab my ladder, get up on the roof, put it all back together, and the show would go on. Yeah, so kind of looking ahead, as when designing a structure to mount props, consider the worst case situation. My worst case personally was that 100-mile-an-hour windstorm that came through my property. It literally destroyed everything except for my mega tree. It stood pretty tall. It was the only thing that didn't really move. But I'm going to rebuild the tower and the spinners. I'm going to design them in a manner that I take into consideration is, what if I have another 100-mile-an-hour windstorm come through? How do I account for that? How do I allow for them to do what I want them to do, but then self-fail? And part of that is I started thinking, like, I've seen awnings that automatically contract when they have wind. Why can't I use some sort of force gauge to do the same aspect and say, hey, there's too much force on this, let's take the whole thing down automatically? How I'm going to do that specifically, I'm not sure, but I will do it. And then, of course, at the same time, allow for a degree of flex and auto correction. So allow for it to move forward, allow for it to move backward, but not put stress at the bottom, have it at the top where it's at, and then readjust itself. And then again, the mini trees and snowflakes not do anything, because they showed me through this particular experience that it worked and it withstood the worst case situation.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It was an awesome presentation, a lot of great ideas